Talk to you in chat.
The ID Pro Manager podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia. From boosted same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET has what you need to win. Bet 100 and get 100 at WynnBET.com or download the WynnBET app and start winning today. State restrictions apply. We're also brought to you by the Sports Gambling Podcast Final Four Watch Party. April 1st at 7:30, SGP will be at the Ice House in Los Angeles, so come hang out with the crew. All info at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/icehouse.
Welcome back, everybody. It is Friday morning, and you are with the IDP Pros Manager Show. With me is Gary. Brad is currently battling Mother Nature, so we'll see if he wins the fight or not today. But Gary, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm doing great, Kraig. Ready to rock and roll on these things, man.
Yeah, we're continuing our foray into the free agency signings here. You know, there's been all sorts of them, and we're trying to narrow it down to the players that are going to be fantasy relevant as far as either starters or bench players, guys that you might be putting on your waiver watch list for the year and your standard size leagues. Of course, applicability may vary, but we're going to be hitting linebackers, defensive linemen, defensive backs. We'll see how many we get through this week. There's been signings continuing up through, the past few days here, but it is winding down as we're getting close to a month from the draft. But Gary, there are still some of the bigger names out there, in terms of people that have been widely fantasy relevant in the past few years, even on the defensive side of the ball. We're not talking the offense here, but, Bobby Wagner's still out there. Even edge guys like Leonard Floyd, he's still out there. Do you think some of these players, a lot of these guys are veterans, getting close to the 10-year mark. Some of them are beyond. Do you think they're kind of waiting to see how the draft plays out before they go and sign, or do you think they're just trying to pick their spot?
Yeah, if I could imagine that they're biding their time, waiting. I'm sure they all want to kind of cash out. They all want to play for a contender. I can also imagine by now that all this shuffling around and the decisions that's been made, everybody's got to kind of sit back and judge what they need to do going into free agency, look at their cap situation, into the draft, and look at their cap situation and decide from there. I can imagine, going behind the doors, we don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know who could have been offered, prior to that wasn't leaked, So there are some very interesting and notable veterans that are free agents right now. So,
yeah, sort of looking through the list, we've even had some of these guys that may have been more relevant in years past that are still sitting out there. But Clark, Robert Quinn, I think it was just 2 years ago, he had a huge year. Leonard Floyd, I mentioned. Bud Dupree, not so much in Tennessee, of course, with what's gone on there, but there's been noise about maybe him going back to Pittsburgh. Deion Jones, Jadeveon Clowney. So a lot of big names out there that still might be trouble finding a home, and then some guys that have gotten cut because of other moves, like Miles Jack, who has been fantasy relevant for players in the past. So a lot of names out there, and we'll have to see where they go, and we'll be updating you probably through at least one show before we start getting close to that.
I would think so.
Time.
Again, a lot of these guys, like Drue Tranquil, I brought it up last week, I believe, or I did on Friday night on the IDP Pro Players Pod, about how, it was already a flooded inside market free agency for linebacker, and then all those guys started getting cut and dropped and all that. So that just made it worse. So that's threw a wrench in, a lot of, I would say, professional sports agents' plans when stuff like that starts happening. Of course, they might have all knew. I'm sure they get their own little backroom parlor that they discuss some things at times. But it's been real interesting with this class.
Yeah, and Drue Tranquil, I don't know if we mentioned, I don't think we did on this show last week, but he was a guy that we know you've been high on. We kind of were hoping he'd find a home, starting spot, and it really seems up in the air right now whether he's going to be a sort of that main second linebacker there for the Chiefs, or if it's going to be Willie Gay, who showed up pretty well for them last year. But it seems clear at the moment Nick Bolton's the guy there. just how much viability, are they going to eat into each other where neither one of them are that exciting if they're both healthy? And I know it wasn't the best landing spot in your eyes.
Yep. Yeah. I'm actually just really, really, I expressed it, I guess, that night on Friday night. I'm actually pretty pissed about the whole situation. Kendricks is going to be productive by default there. But when it comes to Tranquil leaving the Chargers, I was really sorely disappointed that he just didn't go ahead and follow through and resign the guy. A developmental guy for him for years. I used to be a Chargers fan. When they moved, I quit being a Chargers fan. So Tranquil was the only guy that I had any real grasp to, that I just loved as an IDP fan. So, and here he signed for Beans with Kansas City. You're breaking up a little bit on me, Kraig. There you are. You're back in, Kraig. What were you saying?
Sorry about that. No, go ahead with your commentary on Tranquil.
Oh yeah, so going over and hanging out with the Chiefs. I mean, I don't see him walking in and taking over for either Gay or Bolton. I do see him getting maybe what they would consider one of their other outside kind of strong side linebacker positions, the ones that we've seen get like 40 or 50% of the snaps. I'll see him being a huge productive guy there unless something happens to Gay or Bolton. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But I just hate it. Unless the perfect case scenario switches somehow or something really flips, Tranquil managers, you ought to be worried about the next few years and probably his dynasty future at this point.
Yeah, it kind of feels right now that a lot of these guys that might have been fantasy productive for us, whether it's been in a backup role or sort of a breakout role, if guys get hurt, there isn't as big of a market for them. The guys like, Tremaine Edmonds, or even to a lesser degree, TJ Edwards, they're getting these nice sized contracts. But then, anything below that, you might be getting 1 to 2 years, $5-6 million a year at most. But because, like I said, how many are available, but also because of just the changing landscape, and they're not being just those set, one linebacker with a huge snap share or two on some of these teams. They're just seen as more interchangeable than they might have been in years past.
Definitely.
Another former Charger on the list here, it would have been 2 years ago. Last year he was with Philadelphia. He moved to Arizona now, Kyzir White. Going there, he's following a former defensive coordinator from Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon, who's now the head coach there in Arizona. 2 years, $5 million, so sort of similar to Tranquil in terms of money. Another year tacked on there, and we know that the length of the contracts don't necessarily matter as much anymore. But it feels like that'd be Gannon slowly trying to figure out what he wants to do with his defense. It's going to be interesting because they spent 2 high picks on what we presumed were linebackers. Isaiah Simmons 1 year, and then Zaven Collins. Simmons has been moved around a lot and used all over quite a bit, not as a true linebacker. Do you think we're seeing more of that with what they're doing there with the linebackers now, with Kyzir White, sort of a steady hand, or an elder in terms of NFL linebacker years anyway, coming in to be a leader on that linebacking core?
This was actually like breaking. I didn't know this going into Friday night. I didn't know it Friday morning. I'm not sure exactly when that signing happened. I believe it was Friday, but I can't remember. What'd you say the contract was for?
2 years, $10 million.
2 years, $10 million, $5 million. Now, I would say they're bringing him in as a rotational guy. Is probably what they're hoping on. So the other two, Collins and Simmons, are probably kind of on notice this offseason to get their shit together at once. I bet they're on a very short leash. But I don't think it's an instant start for Kyzir White.
I'm pulling it up now. I think it's going to be interesting based on what they did with him last year, with the new coaching staff and where he's drafted. And Isaiah Simmons did a lot of it in college, where he played around, but he played quite a few snaps, even at slot corner. It was like about half of his snaps last year. And if he's going to be continue to be used as that piece all over the field, there might be more viability for White than one might think just based on that contract. But if they do give Simmons a shot to be one of the two, sort of linebackers with they really do switch it up there as far as what we're expecting from Gannon between a 4-3-3-4, like a lot of teams. So it's not just going to be one set, but I think Simmons will be on the field a lot. They invested in him, and he's shown to be useful in many different places. But how much of that's going to be as a linebacker will probably determine a lot of what we get out of White.
Both of them have been inconsistent, not only in production overall, but for IDP purposes, but just in general on film, on the field for the team. It's kind of hard to pull the plug when you're invested like you are, but at the same time, I'm sure you got your hand on it.
Well, speaking of pulling the plug, do not pull the plug on this.
WynnBET is the official online sportsbook of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WynnBET is now active in Massachusetts and tons of other states. Be on the lookout for the WynnBET Win Hour each Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. During WynnBET Win Hour, marquee games of the week will have better odds on WynnBET, giving you a larger payout opportunity. And March Madness is here, so many ways to get in on the big dance. Sign up today and receive a special offer. Bet 100, get 100, limited to state availability. And of course, for our degenerates, only if you hit the biggest long shot parlay of the week, you get $1,000 free credit. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to wynnbet.com or download the WynnBET app. Subject to change. Terms and conditions at wynnbet.com. Must be 21 years or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-522-4700. The SGP guys are going to be hosting a Final Four watch party at the historic Ice House in Pasadena, California, Saturday, April 1st at 7:30 p.m. Get all the details at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/icehouse. Looking to hang out with Sean and Ryan at the stadium, swim, and watch the biggest golf tournament in the world? You can win a 3-night stay at Circa Las Vegas and hang out with the guys. The contest is completely free to enter. Just go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/golf party. If you don't win the contest, you can still get a discount on a room using the promo code SGP15.
Another guy we had interest in here, Azeez Al-Shaair, going from San Francisco to Tennessee. Again, not a ton of money, 1 year, $6 million deal, but he was a guy that's been productive. He's sort of been in a backup role, or if he's been pushed into a starter position because of injuries with San Francisco, been there for a few years, and he's going to what feels like pretty much wide open Tennessee linebacking core.
Love it.
As far as not edge guys. Now, of course, the draft is coming up, and the draft also and feels like it takes a cold water dump on a lot of our aspirations for the next season. But assuming nothing really changes out, it kind of feels they have some younger guys like Monty Rice or Chance Campbell there. I know you said you love it. Is this a guy that you're going to be targeting probably later in draft, given that he's not a huge name?
Oh, yeah. Especially, I really don't care if they go and they draft a guy or not, even sign another veteran. Well-known veteran. I really like this kid. This kid is still young. He has been proven every time that he's gotten a chance with the 49ers because of injuries or such. He's actually elitely graded this past year, I believe it was, or close to it by PFF, so they liked him. I think the opportunity here in this contract, I like this contract. I mean, when you look at a guy like Tranquil that went for $3 million, a year on average. This kid's got a $6 million, prove it. I think he's going to get that opportunity to walk straight in there, prove this shit, perform at a high level in a position that we know this defense is kind of under a rebuild in a way, or it's in a flux, I guess you could say. So there should be plenty of production there for whoever's playing this. And my money is 100% on Al-Shaair.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of weird shuffling around. I mean, in the Tennessee team in general, but you said Bud Dupree got released. He hadn't played a whole lot. They're still figuring out that secondary. They had a lot of injuries. It sounds like Kevin Byard isn't too happy back there at safety. Harold Landry is coming off of injury.
Well, if any of our listeners or podcast people, if they've caught this, I've talked about Al-Shaair being a free agent. I don't know. I probably started back in the middle of the fall, putting him on people's radar at a point in time. If you had a losing season, you should be stashing him at the end of your, benches type thing. So I love this signing, especially. This sealed the deal for me. It's a good one.
Another guy I know that you're not as high on, given what we've talked about previously, Cody Barton. He had been with the Seahawks for 4 years on his rookie deal. Now he's going to Washington on a 1-year deal, $3.5 million. That's the least we've talked about for any of these guys so far. he was a really productive guy when he was on the field for Seattle and IDP players in terms of just, getting you tackles and plays. Didn't grade out very well. The
Not at
Seahawks, like
all.
I said, had him for 4 years and they let him
Yeah,
go, and the market wasn't too
easily,
warm to him. It is
easily.
an interesting spot, though, with the elite defensive line there, and then they got like Jamin Davis and
Mm.
not a whole lot else, although they have some nice safeties. Do you think you could see another situation where he ends up being a value just because, again, assuming nothing else really changes, it's him and Jamin Davis for the linebackers there in Washington?
Right. I'm just going to skip him altogether this year in any redrafts or anything like that. I mean, realistically, I think sure, he could pop back up. He could be a late surprise, but considering the situation and he's not really all that good, I think it's more of a backup situation. And I doubt Washington's done adding somebody or something somewhere along the lines here. But I'm all Davis at this point, the way that they used him last year, and he did show up, and them letting Holcomb go, or they're going to make other plans here. And I know Davis, I believe, was injured. I'm not sure about his status coming back, but they'll probably go back and get John Bostic again until Davis is healthy. Who knows? But either way, they're not going to put a lot of stock into their linebackers when they do have that defensive line like that. And they have a great secondary with Curl and who was the kid? Forrest, Derek Forrest breaking
Yep.
out. So they can afford to go a little lax on their inside linebacker play. So, but I'm not really interested. It was very much productive by default in Seattle, and I think it's just left I don't want to jump on the bandwagon in Washington right now. Not considering that they usually don't give that second guy a lot of playing time.
Yeah, Jamin Davis was put on IR after week 17 with a knee injury. There's not a ton of info out there about it, but he was productive. He sort of took over for Cole Holcomb once he got hurt. Ended up with over 100 combined tackles. Showed a lot more than he did his rookie year. So I still think he's the promising guy there in Washington if you're looking for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of productive, Alex Singleton is a guy that's been productive whenever he's been on the field. If you're just looking to get tackles, he's re-signing with Denver, 3 years, $18 million. Kind of looks like they're going to try to go with him and Josie Jewell, another just sort of tackle-heavy, productive guy there.
Mm-hmm.
Guessing you like the spot anyway for production with what he and Jewell showed next to each other past year.
I will tell you this, Johnny the Greek, our buddy Johnny the Greek, he's a huge fan of this signing. Okay, I still, because of all this roller coaster ride over the last couple seasons, I'm not that excited. Not at this point of the season or the off season, maybe. I know the guy is just continuously productive no matter where he's at.
Yep.
He seems to fall into that situation, and especially like last year, there was a point in time, I think for the majority of his playing time, that he was only getting like 60% or some crazy shit of snaps, but he was producing like a guy that was getting 110% of the snaps, and out producing a lot of the upper tier guys that were 90%, getting their averages. It's just an outlier. It's almost like, oh, I seen that UFO, to me. So I love it. I love getting it when it's at the right price. But I'm looking at this situation where I'm not paying to manage that. Not any significant deal.
Not going out of your way to get him.
No. If he's there at the right timing, sure. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
But he's not my long-term dynasty wish list guy.
All right. Well, we will be back with a couple more linebackers, and we'll switch to defensive tackles and defensive ends after this.
We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is heating up for March Madness. College Pick'em is a great way to get in on the action, especially if your bracket is busted as of day one, like mine. Plus, Underdog Fantasy has your favorite college basketball player props. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN.
A guy that we've talked about in years past here, Gary, I'm kind of curious on this signing. Alex Anzalone re-signed with Detroit. 3 years, $18.75 million. So he got a nice chunk of change. He kind of felt like he had been a bust with where he was drafted with the Saints, and he came around, he got to Detroit. He's been all right, but it didn't feel like he was from a fantasy perspective. Clearly, that's different than the NFL perspective, but it didn't seem like he was really set on being the guy there for them. They've had a lot of injuries. They've tried a lot of different linebacker parts. You think Dan Campbell's just trying to stick with a veteran that knows the system, knows what he can get out of him while he tries to, find other positions get filled? Or do you think that Anzalone is going to be kind of the guy for this next year or two?
Coming into last year, we all were, well, is it going to repeat? Is Anzalone going to be able to do what he did a little bit the first year he was with the Lions? I think it really boils down to the rewarding their veteran. He's solid. He's not spectacular. He's not costing them a lot. And at this day and age, they got the guy that's running the defense correctly, apparently, like they'd like it. So they're trying to fill in pieces around them to continue to build. We've seen Barnes is not the guy. They didn't dive deep to get a hold of Rodriguez in the draft last year. So, yeah, for at least the next couple of years, I think Anzalone is who they're going to lean on again.
Yeah, I mean, he usually had his best season. I'd hope that he played the full season. He's a guy that's been injured a lot throughout his career. But the past 2 years with Detroit, played 14 games. I think he started all of those. And then last year, same thing, got 17 games and finally surpassed 100 tackles by a good amount, 125 or so combined tackles. It'll be interesting to see, that Detroit team is up and coming. It was really exciting last year, and I do think Dan Campbell's sort of the right guy for what they're trying to build there. And I know a lot of people are still on the Malcolm Rodriguez train based on what he showed last year, but they're going to have to see if they can count on him for a full season because, smaller guy, got injured in the NFL already. You have to see if he can stay on the field. So,
yeah, at some point we're going to get to a CJ Gardner signing, I suppose. I don't know if that'll be today or not.
Yeah, we got one more linebacker I want to hit here, and it's just a re-signing, but it feels like a big move based on what else they did as far as not re-signing someone. So Matt Milano signed an extension with Buffalo, and we know Tremaine Edmonds left for big money in Chicago. They don't have a ton, of guys that you're really excited about in that linebacking group there in Buffalo besides Milano. Do you think they're putting their faith in him as sort of, at least for a couple of years here because of, how much money they have to be paying for these other guys? They got him relatively cheap for how productive he can be when he's on the field.
Right.
This is the kind of deal.
This is the kind of deal I was hoping for Tranquil. This really was. I've brought up in podcasts in the past that Milano would be sitting there. I was 99.9% sure all last offseason that Edmonds wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be able to afford to pay this guy his payday. I know it's not a huge payday. They got Edwards and Edmonds for the price of Roquan Smith, or actually less than what it would have cost. So, but Matt Milano, they needed a staple. He apparently he's a Boston guy. I've been a fan of his for a long time, as you know. So it's not surprising to me. And we're keeping an eye on. I know. Oh, I'm trying to think of the guys. I forgot this on last Friday night too. The main guy that veteran that played for Edmonds and Milano last year when they were injured, but we had a short spurt where we got a game and a half, maybe around week 4, week 5, where they had a third rounder from last year. I was trying to remember his name. People ought to get him on the radar, see what he does in camp if they don't add any more veterans.
Dodson and Terrell Bernard.
Okay, so Dodson was the veteran, and Bernard is the one that we want to go stash and keep an eye on. All right, if they don't do anything else, even if they do, still keep an eye on this kid because he was a third rounder. It's kind of come across as a luxury pick for them last year. It's Buffalo. They had already been building a little bit, but I mean, it's notable. It's a notable third round pick, as much of a luxury as it is.
All right, well, we're going to jump over, just because it fits right in here, to defensive backs quickly. Jordan Poyer, still in Buffalo here. He was kind of going out looking for greener pastures in terms of a payday. As we've seen with a lot of players this year, actually, it doesn't seem like he really found it. He's going into, I believe it's his 12th season in the NFL. It's 11th or 12th season. He's a guy that didn't play a whole lot, though, because he was a late-round pick. I believe he was a 7th-round pick by Philadelphia. Didn't play a whole lot early on, but he certainly found a home when he went to Buffalo in 2017, and feels like they're bringing the band back together for a bit. But he is an older guy. For Dynasty, you're probably not looking at him unless you're going to be a veteran competing team, because I think he's turning 32 this year. He's had a little bit of injury concerns with getting dinged up. We know that happens when you're playing a lot anyway. But is he someone you still feel you can rely regularly on if you're going to be a contender?
Definitely. If I'm looking at something within this next, I'll tell you what, would you say 1 or 2 year?
2-year deal. Yeah, he got 2 years, $12.5 million.
He's good to go for 2 years is how I look at it. As long as he's in Buffalo, he's going to maintain exactly what he's been doing. That average might not be what he had the last 2 or 3 years, where I believe he might have had his best seasons, or not. Prior to last season, they might have had.
2020 was his best overall year.
Okay, right, yeah. We probably won't see that ceiling again. The way that they're built now. But I mean, he's definitely a solid option all the way through. He's just lost his dynasty value based on age.
And that happens to a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
This was an interesting one, going from, I believe it was Detroit this past year, to Miami. Deshaun Elliott, formerly of Baltimore. Then he was with the Lions for a year. Now he's got a 1-year deal for not a ton of money going down to Miami. And, of course, Miami's making moves. They already have what felt like they're, not rookies, but young safeties of now, and Brandon Jones and Javon Holland. You got Xavier Howard, let Byron Jones go, traded for Jalen Ramsey. So they already had quite a bit. And this feels sort of like they're building on a strength, given that, this is turning into a pass-heavy NFL, and Deshaun Elliott showed out well. Not probably a whole lot in terms of fantasy value right now, until we know how it shakes out. I mean, if he's going to be playing majority of the snaps, you may take a look at him. But do you kind of think this feels like a backup role for him at this point?
50-50. He could probably earn it. I don't think he actually did that bad up there for Detroit, and he's still solid. I'm not sure if it's one of those situations where they really was focusing on CJ Garner or something of that, there might be some kind of connection there. I didn't see why they didn't re-sign him. I never come across that. So I think he could compete. Somebody to watch. Now we're talking IDP fantasy football here. DBs are kind of dime a dozen anymore, especially the way things are, as we keep mentioning. So we definitely can't look at him as a high-end option if he would have re-signed with the Lions, like he was producing at one point for them.
Yeah, he had his career year last year.
Pardon me?
He had his career year last year in just 14 games, 96 combined tackles. I don't think, unless there's injuries, it feels like he's going to get anything close to that with just what they have in that secondary already in Miami.
Right, exactly.
All right, well, we're going to take a break for this.
Fact: the National Breast Cancer Foundation reports that a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer every 2 minutes. And we already know finding new innovations in research, surgical options, and clinical trials is essential to finding a cure. And to all those fantasy football ladies that may be listening, we also know with early detection your survival rate goes up. And that's why breast self-exams are very important, and the best way to give your old girls their best fighting chance to win the championship. So, with all that being said, the fellas here at the IDP Pro Players Pod would like to remind everyone, the National Breast Cancer Foundation does take donations, so please, go and give what you can. And let's give our mothers, our wives, our sisters, and every woman the support, the resources, and maybe even more importantly, the hope, by knowing we all really do care.
Our next safety up here is Jabril Peppers. He's got a big name from years past, and his fantasy viability has gone down as he's sort of taken a largely backup role since he's been bouncing around here. But I did want to bring him up because he re-signed with New England. He really feels like a Bill Belichick type of guy that can just play all over in the secondary and do a lot of different things. Fantasy-wise, it just feels like more of a mess in that New England secondary. I mean, one of the McCourties, I don't remember which one of them retired that had been there. But it still feels like Belichick playing games just like he does with linebackers, only now it's in his secondary again. Is that kind of the vibe you're getting with this?
Yeah, we were talking about Duger and his prospect with McCourty retiring. When it comes to Peppers, I didn't even bring his name up because I'm not really interested. I don't think he's as good as what his opportunities have been in his career as an NFL player. It has nothing to do with him being a Michigan guy either. I promise. I promise. But when it really boils down to is between him and Duger, I do think at this point, considering I believe Phillips is also a free agent and longer in the tooth, and he would already been phased out last year a lot. We're going to see either Pepper or Duger emerge as the defensive back to own. More than likely, they're going to have to come up for their normal 3-guy rotation amongst linebackers scenarios. They're probably going to have to come up with another one if they don't have another one on the depth chart now that can just sit back here deep and probably won't produce because they'll be playing kind of the McCourtney role, that free safety. That's why we don't know that name that well. I'm not really interested in Peppers if all of a sudden he's getting a bunch of touchdowns on returns, possibly because you're going to get us some extra points there. We've seen that corner, whatever that guy's name was last year, that was playing offense, returning kicks, and playing offense.
Jack Jones, I think.
Defense, yeah.
There were a couple of them that they did a whole bunch of weird stuff with last year on the Patriots, but that's Bill Belichick, and that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Nope. I'm not really interested.
And I think
Keep an eye on it.
They re-signed Jalen Mills, who's played safety and cornerback and, weird stuff for him too. And of course the draft last year, Bill Belichick's not a guy it feels like you can trust for fantasy just a whole lot in general. Yeah,
this was just as likely to throw us completely off, right? And Peppers enter the season is nothing but a special team depth player that's returning every kickoff. Could be. You never know.
And just to make everyone's life difficult, because we were talking about them, so they have Jack Jones, who was a cornerback who'd played well for him last year. Jonathan Jones, so another Jones that they re-signed. It's a really good cornerback for him if you play cornerback leagues. And then Marcus Jones, I think, was the rookie that was playing cornerback and, like you said, offense and all of that. So 3 guys named Jones in the secondary can't be confusing at all for fantasy players. Sort of like it was in the news that David Long signed, but it wasn't the linebacker David Long, because there's 2 of them from the same year being drafted, not confusing at all for fantasy players.
Yeah, it's always interesting to try to look up one of the long guys on like Sports Spiders news or something like that, because it'll get both of them mixed up.
This is the next one we got here is an interesting signing, I thought. Nick Scott went from the Los Angeles Rams to Cincinnati. 3 years, $12 million. So not a ton of money, but it kind of feels like they might be giving him a shot at being one of their starters. Of course, they've lost Von Bell. They lost Jesse Bates. They drafted, I think it's Dax Hill. So there's a thought that he's probably going to be one of the starters this year, but it feels like a new safety core there with the Cincinnati Bengals. And Nick Scott showed out all right for fantasy players last year as a safety. How are you feeling about him moving to Cincinnati, where they're going to have that high-powered offense anyway, so teams are going to be throwing to keep up with them?
As it sits right now, I mean, it's definitely notable. Now, let's look at this situation. Von Bell played strong safety for him. Let's start with the linebackers. Logan Wilson, he's not going anywhere. Pratt re-signed. That situation in front of him is not going to change. You have Von Bell has exited, the strong safety's open, and then you have the free safety where Jesse Bates was. Depends which one he gets. All right. If they can move him up, and I think he's capable. I did track him last year. He's probably very capable. He could be eating a bunch of Twinkies right now, getting ready to put on about to play in the box more. I do think the rookie from last year, I think he's more of a slot guy too. So I don't think
he can play slot too. Another Michigan guy, I think.
Right. So he could be more but go Big Ten. When he's in, if he's in the free safety spot, I'm not really interested in this position. Right. Not heading into this. I would, again, DBs are dime a dozen, and I'm just not really diving into either one of these as starters this year. If you're looking at deep dynasty, I'm going Daxton Hill. I'd like to see where that kid ends up because they put real draft stock into him.
Yeah. Well, this one might get you a little bit more excited. You mentioned him earlier in this show. CJ Gardner-Johnson. A lot of people thought he might be getting a bigger deal after what he showed last year with Philadelphia. 1 year, $8 million. So, I mean, nice money for 1 year, but only a 1 year deal going from Philadelphia to Detroit. Kind of feels like it's going to be Tracy Walker and CJ there for the safeties for him. How you feeling about the fit in Detroit and sort of with that unresolved linebacker core there a bit in front of him?
I'm on board. It's the first time I got to really get to talk about Gardner Johnson here. I mean, this is kind of like the free safety position, or so-called what we call the free safety position for the Giants in IDP production. It produces. Same thing seems to be developed in here for the Lions at both two safety positions, a strong and a free safety. So I'm all in. Gardner's flashed at the Saints. He flashed again with Philadelphia. Not sure why he didn't re-sign with Philadelphia again. It seemed like he had a nice place. Why would you, whatever their terms are, whatever they're doing, he's landed in a great spot. Actually, a spot I like better than Philadelphia for sure, as a defensive back. So I could see him producing that DB1 worth adding, heading and reaching for. And managing it. It's worth it.
What's that? Your computer has another virus? Well, my friend, you need help to stop your obsession with the dirty O. All of this searching for air yards and yards after catch and blah, blah, blah. Stop your dirty O obsession by searching for the IDP Pro Players podcast instead and focus on the other side of the balls. I mean ball. The crew on the IDP Pro Players podcast care about you and your technology by holding true to their no dirty O mantra. Every week, Gary and John bring you the IDP content you need to save your rosters and dominate your league while avoiding the dirty O. So save your technology by tuning into the IDP Pro Players podcast with your longtime and totally unoffensive veteran hosts, Johnny the Greek and Gary the IDP Tipster. Follow them on Twitter at @IDPRO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
All right. Well, we're going to make our switch from defensive backs and dip into some defensive linemen here as well. I don't think this name is really on many people's radar, but those who just sort of follow the draft and are getting into IDP are probably going to know it from years past because I think he was like the number 3 overall pick a while ago. Solomon Thomas re-signed with the New York Jets. He'd been there last year. 1 year, a little over $2 million a year. Big name, and he's been fine when he's been on the field as a rotational piece, but he's nothing really fantasy relevant for me, and I'm guessing that's how you feel too, Gary.
Yeah, just a great, solid NFL performer. Nothing to see when it comes to IDP.
This next guy, not only can he be fantasy relevant, probably more in defensive tackle specific leagues if you're in those, but I put him on the list here because of the effect that I think he can have for the rest of that defense. Dalvin Tomlinson signed, going from Minnesota to Cleveland for 4 years, $57 million, largest contract we've talked about today so far. He's a guy that will get you tackles as being a defensive tackle. He doesn't do a whole lot else than that, but he is good at what he does there, being in the middle and eating up blockers, which was a problem last year for Cleveland. Cleveland got the ball ran down their throats last year. They had all sorts of trouble figuring out their linebacking core. Not even necessarily from just a fantasy production from him, but what it can mean for the rest of the defense. Do you like this signing, Gary?
Oh, yeah, I love it. I liked him last year in Minnesota, even though I believe he got hurt and he missed a stretch. He did come back in and started performing a little bit. I believe he's also a former Giant, which performed, admirably there. So, yeah, being moved in to shore up the inside of this line with Myles Garrett sitting there, hopefully some kind of other improvement coming, better play from some someone else within the interior. They don't have Clowney yet. They haven't signed him.
Yep.
They did or did not?
Nope, they didn't resign.
Okay.
You were correct. They got
Right.
the next guy on the list here, if you want to just wrap it all together. Ogbo Okoronkwo went from Houston to Cleveland to be an edge guy. 3 years, $22 million. So he got some decent money to be an edge player for him too, as they're rebuilding that line.
Yeah, but he's even less of an edge rusher in my mind, unless he like changes his. He's more of an interior defensive tackle. I get it. I mean, he's probably capable. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not as excited about that, but it is another great signing. It will shore up that one position next to both of those other two, Garrett and Tomlinson. But if I'm looking for an IDP option, and I'm looking for a good DT, I'm definitely looking at Tomlinson. I think that playing next to Garrett's going to be a bonus for him. Not the playing by Hunter and DeJarius Smith last year wasn't, but I do think in this particular 4-3 scheme that it's going to work in his advantage. And there's another solid defensive tackle signing or defensive end signing on this line that helps secure that feeling that he'll be there. As a DL play, you're probably looking at a 2, maybe.
Yeah, it really depends on sort of your scoring settings and how it gets split up with the edge players versus D end or all that. So know your league, know your scoring, know your positions as always. But yeah,
Well,
certainly in leagues where you have that interior lineman or defensive tackle position, he's certainly a guy that's higher up as far as being drafted.
Yep. Yeah, I like it.
So next one, finally got his contract that he was searching for last year, and he almost had with Chicago. Larry Ogunjobi re-signed with Pittsburgh, 3 years, almost $29 million, so a nice chunk of change there too. He'd gone to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal after a failed physical with Chicago. Seems to be in a nice position. Again, they play more of a 3-4 there, so you're more looking for him to eat up blockers and get you tackles, but he's been productive getting to the quarterback before too. Cameron Hayward's getting long in the tooth. I think they still have a guy you like. Chris Wormley is still there too, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's a free agent at the moment.
He is? Okay.
I think so. Yep.
Regardless, how you liking the fit of Larry there for a couple more years in Pittsburgh?
Lukewarm. Same thing as last year. I'm just kind of lukewarm on him. I believe he had a breakout year, down in New Orleans, and then he got busted for some PEDs or whatever those things are called. I don't mean the Pez the dispensers either, the little candies. I meant the real hard stuff. But either way, and then since then it's kind of dropped off. And we watched this weird free agency stuff go with him, where he got signed, failed, and he was signed for nice contracts. He was in big news. It was a little bit more blown up than I thought it kind of should have been. So I think in the end, at least from an IDP perspective, I'm not sure what a Pittsburgh fan feels like. Mediocre, is still lukewarm. He didn't come in and super wow me or anything. So I'm probably not too interested. I'm not really looking this way at all.
So next name here was one of the more confusing signings for me, and I did want to throw him on there because I think it throws a monkey wrench in a couple of different things here. Samson Ebukam went from San Francisco to Indianapolis. 3 years, $27 million. So
we could just. Nah, I'm not interested. Are you?
Here's my question, because I think it has a ripple effect. They had nice pieces on their defensive line. DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart there in the middle. Kwity Paye, when he was on the field, he was awesome, but he couldn't stay healthy. And then they have Deo Dangbo on the other side with Yannick Ngakoue mixed in. Yannick's a free agent. Does this just feel like creating a mess at those defensive end positions, though?
It's just replacing stuff. It's replacing depth. I mean, I can't say that I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. Isn't going to be a starter, but I'm not really interested in other than anybody than Kwity Paye at the moment. And probably I can't see that changing. I don't think, unless they try to make a big splash, which there are no big edge rushers and not defensive linemen. You could go get a Bud Dupree, but he's not proven. So I'm talking big names. There's no huge names out there to sign. So I'm sticking with Paye and just letting the rest kind of weed itself out. I don't think there's anything that's left out there other than a draft pick that could get my attention other than pay.
And with where they've invested, Pay I think was a first rounder, Odangbo
Mm.
was a second rounder. Kind of feels like they have what they hope to be their defensive line set. And I get the whole depth thing. Every team can use more depth pretty much at all positions if they had more roster spots. But just $9 million a year seemed like a lot of money for a veteran depth guy that they're putting on here when they aren't really even sure it feels like the direction that team is going.
Yeah, and technically he can play linebacker. I think he's not actually like the straight defensive end edge type guy. I think that he is more of a linebacker / outside linebacker edge rusher. So he can actually play the strong side linebacker position for him too, which we seen last year ain't worth shit.
All right, well, we'll see you right after this, our last ad break for the day.
Thanks for watching live over on YouTube. Make sure to smash that subscribe button and like this video on YouTube and hit that notification icon to stay up to date anytime we go live.
We got another signing here. This isn't a bigger one, but we'll get into a couple bigger ones before the end of the day here. Arden Key went from Jacksonville to Tennessee, 3 years, $21 million. So $7 million a year. Could very well be another depth piece, but Tennessee is still trying to figure out a whole bunch. We talked about that earlier. Arden Key had been productive in Jacksonville when he'd gotten some playing time. Of course, they already have Danico Autry, Jeffrey Simmons on that defensive line. Could end up being the third guy there, but do you have very much interest in him? I know he'd been a higher pick by the Raiders, but didn't really pan out with them.
No, not really. And it has more to do with it has more to do with the Jacksonville line. Somebody's got to break trend there, really catch our attention, because every time we do have a little spark, it's just not how they're schemed. I think
he's in Tennessee. He went from Jacksonville to Tennessee.
Apologies. I just messed that up. This would be a live floor editing, folks. There was a little cutout, but I thought I still got back on track. Please ask me again what you're saying.
Yeah, Arden Key is going from Jacksonville to Tennessee. It kind of feels like he might be the third guy there.
All right, yeah,
Simmons and Autry.
Okay, yeah, I do like him going over there. He's been a solid veteran. There needs to be some kind of production by default there now, but you're also looking at him playing next to Jeffrey Simmons. Hopefully, Harold Landry is returning at some point, which all coming off an Achilles. I don't think we see him at 100%. I think it was an Achilles. It might have been a knee. I'm not 100%. Anyways, I'm trying to think for a second. That's called a progressive moment for you old people. That's what I just had, if you've seen that.
He did hear it's ACL. It was his ACL.
Okay. All right. So when it really boils down to, you got Jeffrey Simmons that really needed some help, and Key is kind of in spot starts and opportunities that he has. He's a solid veteran. I might look at him in a deeper league. Am I looking at him in a standard? I'm keeping an eye on him, possibly if that standard league's got a defensive tackle spot.
Well, this next name I think you'll have some more thoughts on. He's one of the bigger contracts even on this list for defensive linemen. Zach Allen went from Arizona to Denver, sort of replacing Draymond Jones, who went from Denver to Seattle. Zach Allen got 3 years, $45.75 million. So a nice chunk of money there. Denver is clearly in a win now mode, trying to get some nice defensive pieces there. Zach Allen had his best year as a pro last year. He upped his tackles, sacks, tackles for a loss. Are you liking the move to Denver, which is kind of similar scheme there for him?
When this first went down, no, I wasn't. I thought it was actually a downgrade, considering we've really not had that type of defensive end come out of Denver that's consistent enough to hold on to, and likely because they don't have a pass rush, especially they barely had a pass rush with Chubb there. Then they have no pass rush. And I'm going to say it again like I did last Friday night. You guys need to quit doing Baron Browning. Leave it alone. Walk away. It's okay. All right. So, but either way, this is the best guy on their defensive line likely right now. I agree with that. If they used him as an edge rusher, if he's got that actual, he can lose a little bit of weight, whatever it takes. I don't know. If he can do it from a 2-point stance, I'm interested. If he's going to end up playing that DeMont Jones or whatever the guy's name was that just left from there. If he's playing at interior defensive end, man, no, I'm not really interested until they get some help around him. Not at all. Not at all.
All right, and we're gonna wrap it up here with a couple of Philadelphia Eagles. They're trying to bring what of the band they can back together from last year. Of course, we know they've had a lot of money they're having to throw around and sort of save for a Jalen Hurts extension here. But Brandon Graham off a career year, 1 year, $6 million re-signing. Fletcher Cox, the old steady defensive tackle, 1 year, $10 million. Of course, they both had really good years. Javon Hargrave moved on. I think we'll probably get to him on next week. But they were really productive in that rotation. You know, we had concerns going into the year with using that rotation if guys are going to be able to be productive. For a lot of the season, Hassan Reddick, kind of didn't do a whole lot, but he came on later in the year for him and had a great postseason. I think it's going to be hard for them to repeat. They're a year older, but it still feels
Riddick's
like
not
there's fantasy
there
value
either.
to be found there.
Didn't Riddick sign somewhere?
Multi-year deal with Philadelphia when he signed.
Oh, was it? I thought that. Oh, I don't
He
know
was on a
what I
1
was
year with the
thinking.
Panthers, and then he signed with
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
Okay. All right.
So
So
he's got 2 years left in Philly.
I mean, Graham and Fletcher Cox, both of them are going to be in this rotation one way or the other. I don't see that there's any way that they're going to be able to not have some type of rotation just exactly like they had last year. The only difference will be that they won't have Vernon Hargrave on the field with them. So they do have that second year or second round rookie from last year, I believe, maybe, or first rounder. They're
Jordan
probably
Davis
expecting
was
a
like
lot of
pick
play.
13 or something. Yeah.
Right. It maybe he's the answer, but I'm not going to depend on my IDP points consistently coming from either Cox or Graham. As a signing for the Philadelphia Eagles, hey, way to treat your really long time veterans well, and hopefully you get them a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, it kind of feels like if people are reaching out to get these guys based on last year's production, you bring that up a lot. You can't count on last year's production going into the next year. It feels like you're going to be hurting yourself if you do that. But if they were to fall in drafts later and you're getting them as a late second defensive lineman or third defensive lineman, that kind of feels like where it's probably going to be the sweet spot for those two.
Yep.
Well, that's it. That's our second round of defensive free agent signings. We've got probably at least another show here for you guys. We'll see how many we can fit in next week, and hopefully Brad will be back with him knocking out Mother Nature to get back on here with us. But Gary, tell everyone sort of where they can find you and all the stuff coming up here. I know you got some more recording you're doing today.
I don't reveal my address, but that's okay. Anyways, you can catch me right here every
one.
All right, yeah. Okay, it's at Fridays mornings right here, 10 a.m. with usually Brad and Kraig. Brad has had things to do, a special assignment last week, and apparently a big storm rolled in this week. So miss you, Brad. Check out the IDP Pro Players Pod on SGPN, on Spotify, wherever else you find your podcast. And I'm just going to sign off, man. It's been an interesting week. I can't wait to get the next week.
That's going to do it for us, folks. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next Friday morning.